Hey, this is Katie, and welcome to the ActionCAST. Today, we are going to face a topic that faces us right back in the face. Owning a business is never easy. And part of that is trying to get people to believe in us. But sometimes the challenge comes when we find out we really don't believe in ourselves. It's a hard topic, but it's one that is going to make all of us stronger. This is going to be an awesome conversation. I'm looking forward to having it. Welcome to ActionCAST. Welcome to ActionCAST. This is the place where home care owners grow from right where they are to right where it is meant for them to be. And part of that conversation is today. Part of that conversation happens today. And the one that when I wanted to deal with this topic that is so fragile for a lot of us, the person I wanted to talk to was Jessica Nobles. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. I'll be honest with you, imposter syndrome, that itself is a big word. And whenever I saw the show notes that we were going to discuss imposter syndrome, I thought that's strange. Me, like all the things that I'm great at, like all of my strengths, like all the topics we could have chosen, and then imposter syndrome. That's a big one.
Mm-hmm. It is a big one. And it's one that doesn't get talked about enough, but I feel like it's an obstacle that gets put in the way a lot of times that we don't even recognize ourselves. And I will say that if you don't have the privilege of knowing Jessica is the co-founder of Home Care Ops, and she helps home care owners from her own lived and earned experience, starting as that small startup. And it's a story that I have heard. I've had opportunity to hear it multiple times. It always resonates with me, the different challenges, the different things that you face along the way, and being able to identify with owners, no matter if they say, oh, who's the first person in my office I should hire? We hear that one a lot. Or, oh my gosh, this other agency that I opened, I didn't recognize the challenges that another location was going to bring. Or I went into another state and I didn't realize how big of a deal that was going to be. And you're able to help them at every level of that. And I have always very much appreciated that. So I was privy to a conversation that you were having with a group of owners, and they were going over all these things that I felt you were going to give very tactical answers for. I thought you were going to say, you need to do this, this, and this. And as they got deeper into the conversation, you just stopped and looked at one of them and said, I almost feel like you're dealing with imposter syndrome. And the energy in the room changed. And I felt it. I felt those owners just attached to that, and they saw a truth in it. And for the rest of the time, I think you had an hour session because it was part of our private coaching. And they attached to that, and they just kept asking you follow-up questions. And the whole conversation wound up being about that. And in my mind, I thought, home care needs this. Home care owners need this understanding. And if there's such a desire for that in this small group, because we do very small group settings, man, the larger group needs this as well. And so that is what I wanted to talk about today. I will say, little note here, I'm going to read the definition of imposter syndrome just so that everybody's on the same page as we continue the conversation forward. I have an actual piece of paper here with it. Imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where someone feels like a fraud despite evidence of their success, believing that they don't deserve their achievements and that people will eventually discover their incompetences, even when presented with concrete proof to the contrary. It is a persistent feeling that they are not as capable as others perceive them to be, despite their own accomplishments. And I think probably half of our audience was like, oh my God, that's me. So talk on that. What a bit of a background question. Can you tell me about your experience with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I felt imposter syndrome whenever I felt like you sent me over this topic, because I was like, that's strange. Why would she send me that? I'm confident. I communicate well. I'm not easily intimidated. And she wants me to talk about that. and I had to sit with it a minute, to really say, okay, I had to search myself, because I began to feel imposter syndrome by thinking, well, I don't have imposter syndrome. What is what is she talking about? Because I hear other people talk about it, and I almost kind of internally think, is that a sign of weakness? Like, do they just need to gain more confidence? But as I was really setting with it, it's not, for me, imposter syndrome didn't show up as this thing to where, I didn't feel like I was deserving. Like, I've worked hard for my accomplishments. I've made tough decisions. I've made sacrifices. I've overcome some incredible insecurities, and I've worked hard for what I've achieved, but I made a lot of mistakes.
Mm.
I failed forward a whole lot. And I'm always afraid. Like, some of the things that literally keep me up at night, and they take way more space in my brain than they should, is that nagging fear of, what if people look back and find out like about this mistake, or I made this bad call, or I let go of this person that I shouldn't have let go of because I just didn't want to invest in their development, or I felt like I was incapable of developing them to the level that they really could have been developed, or I like had this caregiver that actually didn't show up and our client was really unhappy, and or this negative review was left, or all the different things that you can look back in all of the things that have made me successful, right? There's been a lot of things that's why me and Clint, we spend our days and our nights and our weekends and even our vacations, sharing ways that we failed, the ways that we overcome, the ways that we've learned to do it better. But for me, imposter syndrome, it wasn't that constant devalue of self-worth as much as it was that fear of, what if people think I'm a fraud, or what if people don't think that I deserve to be on this stage or in this capacity. And as from a home care owner, and especially as a coach, because as a coach, one thing, I'm not comfortable with that term to this day. I'm just like, hey, we're all home care owners here helping each other grow. We're all at at different levels. So we have different things to contribute to each other. But as a coach, I've really had elements of imposter syndrome that has kicked up a whole lot, because I'm teaching people to do what I'm currently learning to improve. So there's a lot of rooms for imposter syndrome in just daily actions and daily mentoring of others.
That's good. And it speaks to me that when the subject was brought up to you, because you're strong in who you are right now, it was almost a defense mechanism to say, no, I'm not. No, that's,
Yeah.
like it was your own personal shield. And I do know you well, and we have opportunity to work together a lot. So I have heard your story of being that little girl in Mississippi, very humble origins, very, your first entrepreneurial experiences and stuff. Like, I have heard those stories, and I've heard you share those in a way that lifts others up. And it 100% does. But then part of me thinks, like, when you're talking about it from the perspective of imposter syndrome, is there, as we share that testimony to others and they see how far we come, is there a part of, like, you and me, that we're telling a story and relating it to them, showing it as our past, but we still see ourselves as that person? Like when you're presenting that, do you see yourself as the actual strong, capable business person you are now, or is there a part of us as business entrepreneurs that we're telling people as though it's past tense, but we still see ourselves as that? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where does that identity lie?
I think that little girl is always in there. And yeah, I feel like I spent years trying to prove that that little girl was capable enough and willing to work hard enough, and would do just a little bit more enough to to succeed. Somehow I ended up middle-aged, still saying one day this little girl. So yeah, I think that she's always in there. Um, I think with awareness, being fully aware and embracing and really recognizing what that is, like what imposter syndrome is. And you can call it, yeah, a lot of people, they might call it insecurity or all those different things. But if we really look at imposter syndrome and for what it really is, I think it really stems from the fear of losing what we worked so hard to build. And for me, whenever I had that awareness of, oh my God, what everybody's calling imposter syndrome, that I'm like, no, I don't have that. I don't have that. What I have is I've worked hard to get here. I've made mistakes to get here. I'm not proud of every single thing that got me here, but I am proud of where I am. And I am proud of overcoming and pressing through. And I recognize imposter syndrome for what it is. And that is a reflection of growth. And so now when I look back at the mistakes that I made, when I look back at the small-minded, oh my gosh, I made so many small-minded decisions. I lived in a world of reaction and survival. And anybody that's a home care owner knows where the lane of survival and just trying to get by is. And I lived on that for so long in a reactionary state that now when I look at, man, I've grown so much. And it's been those mistakes. It's been how many ways can I mess this up before I learn to do it better? It's all those things that I look back on and say, okay, the things that I once saw as liabilities they're now my credentials. And it's that reflection of growth. And whenever I do begin to feel that imposter syndrome, and it rears its head up, and it does it often. It's like Clint says, every new level is the same old devil. It's just at a new level and it seems even bigger. Every time it raises its head, it's like that trigger, it's that flashing light of, hey, new territory. And this is your next level. You're growing. I begin to recognize it as, okay, this is a reflection of growth, or it's time for me to step up into that next level rather than shying back and trying to work out all of these negative emotions that sometimes they hold me back.
That's really good. And that actually goes in with what my next question I was going to ask, is it something that can be beneficial? And hearing you talk, I can see that, like, you're speaking of embracing it as almost a connection to yourself and not allowing life to outpace you and saying, hey, this is who I am and where I'm at. And this is something I'm going to struggle with, on some level, like this is who I am. So is it just a matter of accepting it and embracing it? Is it a matter of separating yourself from it? What is that? What does healthfully dealing with imposter syndrome look like?
I think it truly just goes back to self-awareness. And imposter syndrome itself, the benefits of it, if you could call, the silver lining, is it keeps you humble and you're always striving to get better and you're always in the state of learning. But for imposter syndrome, it really is about embracing it and learning what are the trigger signs. Whenever you begin feeling those things, how do you flip the script on them? Whenever you begin to feel insecurity, really looking at it and saying, is it because I'm about to step into a bigger room full of people that 5 years ago, it was like I aspired to be them. And now I'm considered peer-to-peer of them or even mentoring them, right? It really is looking at it as that reflection of growth of, if I'm feeling this, then I'm growing. And if I am feeling this, then I'm fearing losing something that I've worked so hard to build. And rather than fear of losing it, I'm going to leverage it. What from my past can I leverage to help me not only get to my next level, but to help others get there as well? And that's the way that I have took all of the things that imposter syndrome can kind of bring into your life and your mind and that mental battle. And that's the way I've made it beneficial. And right now, even like this is a very raw, transparent, not the conversation that I would like just love to have. But I hope that by me being real and just being honest about really deep-seated insecurities that I have, that it helps somebody else. And by embracing that and just being honest, transparent, and being aware that this is imposter syndrome. This is how I move past it. This is how I leverage it. This is how I help others. It helps me every day to be very confident in who I am and to look back at all the things that got me to here and appreciate them for where they've guided me to.
That's awesome. And awareness, I feel like you just attached awareness to it. That I feel becomes the tool in some way. Like looking back, do you have moments that you associate with, man, that was imposter syndrome, I didn't even recognize it? Do you have moments where you feel like are there anchor moments where that has played a role, or is it more one of those things that you feel like has followed you and there's no distinct place, but you can see where it's had an effect?
I like looking back, which once again, imposter syndrome is a new word for me, right? I didn't grow up with it. But even as a kid, I was very entrepreneurial and I like started my first business when I was like 11, 12 years old. And I don't ever remember then thinking, oh, people are going to look at me and feel like I'm a fraud. It wasn't until I had started my home care business and I was working with a client. It was actually my very first client who was very well connected to like global leaders. Now you talked about that small girl in Mississippi. I was that small, like 18-year-old super Southern girl in Mississippi who like grammar wasn't a strong point for us small town Corinth, Mississippi people. And he was constantly correcting me and he would like he would snap his fingers every time I said a word wrong or I had too much Southern twang. And he would say they're going to like, you're not ignorant. Don't speak ignorant. Don't talk ignorant, and he was trying to help me, but in a lot of ways, it began to build a lot of am I not worthy because of my upbringing, because of the way that I speak or the words that I don't know to say. It began to seed some of them. And we were at a big corporate event and there was like 50 big corporate guys all in this event. And there was just several of us women. I very much felt like a little girl was at this event. And my client at the time wasn't able to get up and do his speech. And so he was like, you're going to go for it. Go do it. And I had to get up and give this speech. And I heard this guy on the front row lean over and said, who is she? And, he leaned over to somebody else and they're kind of like become this, like, I could hear them talking and trying to talk about who am I? And they hadn't heard of me. And it began to like, I've begun to feel this overwhelming, like, do I not deserve to be here? Like, what do they think of me? I felt so small and so insignificant and so insecure. And after the event was over and they come up and they were talking to me and I was so nervous and like, I didn't even want to speak anymore to them. But I began to realize that they weren't talking about who is she and she doesn't deserve to be here. They actually talked about how impressed they were. But at that time, I wasn't hearing through their perception. I could only hear in what they were saying through my own fear and my own insecurities. And I think if there would have been the word, or if I would have Googled it back in that day, back in that time, imposter syndrome probably would have been the definition of that moment. And so I've learned a lot from that moment. That was also where the first time that I experienced imposter syndrome from a negative standpoint, because there was another one of the women there and they began saying, oh, she's this and this, and she's not really even done that. She was just like doing whatever her client told her to say. And I began to feel attacked. So I felt the imposter syndrome from the place of feeling attacked. But then I realized it was her own insecurity as well. And I think if I could pinpoint anywhere that I would think this is probably the first time that I really felt it. And I felt it in ripples. Like where the next time I went into a room where it was a big room full of big people, I carried that feeling walking into it. And it was something that I began to have to overcome every time.
Yeah, fear grows.
Yeah.
Fear is a wave, and that's true. I've heard somebody say that fear always speaks in a voice that is loud but never completely accurate. And that's like that describes a lot of what you're saying. And I feel like so many home care owners can identify with that moment where you're in the middle of trying to do something. You're in the middle of trying to present. It's probably presenting is a lot of it, honestly. Like that, I feel like we all have that vulnerability associated with that, where you're trying to do one thing, and then in the back of your mind, fear starts speaking in a voice that you really can't hardly put down, and you're trying to go forward and put your best foot forward. And it can be so dramatic. And the challenge with imposter syndrome is it grows as your level grows if you're not careful, if you don't learn those healthy balances, because the higher and I'm using the term higher in levels of business, the higher you become, the more vulnerable you are to that attack of not feeling that you're worthy of your station, I guess I should say. And that's really good. I actually I work in an addiction field, that, like, as part-time. And in addiction, we use sobriety. We use an old kind of analogy of addiction. And I understand that imposter syndrome is not an addiction per se, but I feel like the resemblance is worth mentioning, that addiction is a monster, and it's an uncontrollable, horrible monster. And our option as people is to put it in a cage. And that's all we can do is lock it up. We can't tame the monster. We can't make it a good person or, a good monster. We can't change its motivations. All we can do is put it in a cage. And then sobriety, in addiction terms, sobriety is not overcoming the monster. Sobriety is moving farther away from the cage. And long-term sobriety is only your distance away from the cage. And I feel like the way you're describing imposter syndrome lends itself to that. Like, you are not overcoming it per se. You're moving away from it having power in your life and being able to chart your course.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I'm speaking on something that I have never studied. I have only lived. So it's really like, this is the way that it has manifested, like in my life, and the kind of the way that it's kind of reared its head, and like the way that I have navigated it. And really, with age and just experience and living and succeeding and failing and succeeding again, we all have a level of professional business maturity. Like there's maturity that comes with living in life, and then there is professional maturity that comes with just owning a business, operating businesses, having to be a leader when inside you're quivering and shaking and you're doubting everything. But you have to go out and you have to put on that face, and you have to lead with confidence. And I think one of the ways that I have combated that, all the feelings and emotions that come with imposter syndrome, is just confidence. Like really getting confident with who I am and confident with my communication. I feel like in the industry, we're known for being really strong communicators, and it goes down to our three foundations of success, and that's transparent communication, clear and defined expectations, and those clear next steps. And I think having those three things in my life, and always saying, okay, I'm going to have to be transparent about this, and I'm going to have to have those clear and defined expectations. And I don't put those in my life just to sound good. I had to create a standard for myself, because one of the things that dealing with imposter syndrome will kind of lead me to do is I only want to tell the pretty things. I only want to say the marketing math. And sometimes whenever I even go back and I look at some of my emails and my posts and some of the speeches that I gave, and it's like, multi-million dollars in 2 years, and like, you can grow this, and you want to make $100 million a month, you want to make $100,000 a week in revenue, you can absolutely do that. And it's all true. And I've done that, and I've helped hundreds of other home care owners to do that. But sometimes I just want to show the shiny. But that's not real life. Everybody, including me and everybody that I've helped, even with coaching, and I'm just helping them to avoid some of the mistakes that I made and get to their success faster, easier, and hopefully a little simpler than I had to do. But one of the things that I have to always keep myself in integrity of is transparent communication. Clear and defined expectations. Be real, be raw, be vulnerable. Don't try to always put the marketing picture out there. Put the real life. It is those hard knocks. It is those big mistakes. It is those big oops moments. It is the bad investments, whether it be time, money, effort into people, that got me here. And one of the most powerful things that I am experiencing, I don't even want to say it in the past tense, I'm experiencing right now, is owning my story. Every part of my story. The good parts, the bad parts, the little small town girl from Mississippi that didn't know how to say, eatable and tortilla and all the words that I said so ignorantly that I still sometimes fall right back into, all of the things that I wanted to erase from who I was in my past are the things that I see. Owning my story and every part of what made me me. That is what gives me power. There is no judgment that hold power over me, even my own mind, if I own my story and make that's all part of my success. That's not evidence against it. And that has been one of the most powerful things to help me overcome my own shortcomings, my own feelings of, am I good enough? Am I true enough? Am I consistent enough? Am I disciplined enough? Am I worthy to show up and step into this next level of life and success? And so owning my story has been a big part of how I overcome that every single day. And it drives me to help others.
That's awesome. And I will say that I am confident. I know our home care owners, and I guarantee you that there are those that are watching this or maybe listening to it podcast style that maybe they're feeling like vindicated, like, man, I have a friend in the room. And then I guarantee you there are those that are listening. It's like, oh my gosh, I just discovered part of myself that I didn't know was there. Like, they're seeing themselves a little bit more clearly. We have a hard time viewing our own selves clearly. I feel like we can see others so clearly sometimes, but we really struggle with self-reflection, just as a species, just across the board, but especially in things like this, that maybe, like you said, doesn't have a name in our life on some level, but affects us every decision we make. And I will say, if you're a home care owner that really is feeling that and can identify with it, put it in the comments. Help other home care owners feel we need community as a group, as an industry. We spend our lives caring for others, and so seldom are we cared for well ourselves. And so put in there and help others identify with that and see that there's strength in the numbers of this is a fight we're all fighting, and showing up every day. And I'm so grateful for the home care owners that I see show up every day. We get to work with them privately, and then also in the forward facing group where, maybe we can't have as close a contact with them, but I certainly see that. And they're out there swinging and coming up against, no doubt, this stuff every time they, for the Chamber of Commerce and all those places where you just feel that. And I do want to give you the floor, because I feel like you can speak wisdom so much to home care owners. And I see you do it in private coaching. I see you change lives every day. That is not hyperbole. I genuinely see that. and, have a stack of testimonials to prove it. But I see that. I would like to offer you the opportunity to speak to that home care owner who maybe has self-discovered that right now, who they're faced with something that they haven't even considered about themselves. They're all of a sudden discovering a chink in their armor that they wish wasn't there because in other ways they're so strong. What would be your wisdom, your advice to give to them to what helps you on a daily basis stand up and be who you are in this industry, change an absolute industry, and still carry that with you? Still know you have that little monster in the cage and change the world. How do you do that?
Progress, not perfection. And that is success. Success is not an end of life achievement. It's a result of the things that we achieve and do every day. So flip the script on imposter syndrome and the things that you're feeling right now. If you're feeling insecurity, if you're feeling that fear, know it's because you've built something great. You're building something great and you don't want to lose that. So embrace that. Take everything that in your past and all of the emotions that you feel, like I said earlier, all of those things that we once considered liabilities, let that be your credentials, your credibility. Leverage that, embrace it, own your story, be confident in who you are and where you're going. And just every single time you get that warning light, kind of like that on your dashboard when you drive, you get that warning light, it tells you something's up. Just acknowledge, be aware. Okay, if that's imposter syndrome, then I'm getting into uncharted territories. I am growing. This is an opportunity of growth. This is not failure. This is growth. This is not weakness. This is what it feels like to grow. And I think just by really accepting it. And someone told me just a few years ago, whenever I was transitioning from a home care owner to a coach, and more in the public eye, and with public eye, there comes praise and then there comes ridicule and so many insecurities that we had to overcome. And I was about to go out on a big stage where there was hundreds, probably over 1,000 people that was attending this event. And my coach was there. It was her event. And she told me, she said, "I've been holding the place for you." And I'm so thankful that someone is holding the place. And I want to be the person that's holding the place for others. There's other women, there's other men out there that they are working so hard. And right now they're in the hustle and the struggle and the grind, part of their business and part of their growth. And every single day they get up and they overcome first the mental battle, and then the physical battle, the financial battle, the leadership battle, the insecurity battle. And I'm here. I'm holding the space for you. We're here to support you. That's why at Home Care Ops, we don't just have coaching programs where we give so much free resource and free networks and community. We want you to have all those tools available because we know that helps you to grow. And whenever we grow personally, we will also be way more open and way more aware to be able to grow professionally. And when we grow professionally, our business grows and our team grows. And as we scale, it's so important that as we overcome our own things, that we're open enough, that we're transparent and honest enough, and even confident enough to then begin to pour into our teams. Because we want to scale our business, and that means pouring into the leaders of our business so that we're not growing a business by ourselves. And we definitely can't scale a business by ourselves. So for someone out there, if maybe you're sitting there and you're feeling a little emotional or maybe insecure or empowered right now, if I was listening to this on the other side, I would have went through all those three emotions of a little insecure, a little of like, no, that's not me. No, denial. And then I would feel empowered of, okay, now I know how to manage. I know how to handle. I know how to redirect. I know how to leverage all of these things that I once saw as weakness and the things that I wanted to keep buried. I know how to leverage them. I know how to identify the triggers, and I know how to see it as this is a reflection of growth. This is a sign that I'm ready for that next level. I'm going to walk into it. I'm going to embrace it, and I'm going to be confident and know that when I'm confident, the person in the room with the most confidence wins every time.
That's right. That's right.
So
That's right.
that is my little secret weapon for overcoming a lot of things is just being confident. And sometimes I'm not confident always in who I am, but I'm confident in my story being able to help others. And sometimes my priority is how can I serve? How can I serve to the level that they get such good outcomes from it, that it feeds and it fuels what I need to feed and fuel in me? And that's really where Home Care Ops was founded from, is that need and desire to really fuel others, because on a personal, very selfish note, it helps fuel all the things inside of me as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to be super vulnerable, super real in today's session.
Absolutely. Hashtag turn your liability into your credentials. I love that. That is awesome. And I will say I'm inspired. You have inspired others. And there is no greater test of strength than to be willing to look at your weaknesses. That is only strong people are willing to look at those weak spots and say, you know what? Because that's how we're strongest, is to recognize those things. And I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate that you're willing to be vulnerable to, this isn't the private group. This isn't, the select group that we all know. And this is home care. This is home care. And this is where your heart is and your passion is. And I feel it. I know everybody can feel it that is watching today. And I truly appreciate your sharing with us. I will say, for those, I know we have mentioned action leaders, we've mentioned different things. I will put a link in the comments for those that want to book a call to see what we offer and talk about what their best steps forward is in their entrepreneurial journey. But I will say, if you're one of those owners that's just getting started, look, we have a ton of free resources here. We are seeking to help the home care industry. We do that in a variety of ways. And if where you're at is to learn a little bit about this and to take it and use it, that is how we all started. That is where we're at. If you're in a place in your business to where that's not sufficient for where you're at and you need that next level, we're here for that too. That is part of our function, and that's part of how we grow home care as an industry. This has been incredible. This is one of the ways that home care ops is improving an industry, because it's not home care ops in just title. It is real industry professionals, you and Clinton and all those that work together to improve who we are one step at a time. It's 1% a day. It's not a magic overhaul. It's not waving a magic wand of fairy dust and all of a sudden you have all the caregivers you want and this and that. That's not how real business happens. Real business happens 1% at a time. And home care owners, the owner is the most important part of their business. It's their business's most important asset. And so you recognize that, and I appreciate that. I hope that everyone here has gotten that nugget. Take that one thing that she has said today that really resonated with you. Write it down, put it on a Post-it note. If you go in Jessica's office, there'll be Post-it notes. I guarantee you that of multiple things that she is the Post-it note queen. We have trainings about that. And so, but there are things that you got out of this that can change your year. That this conversation can take all those goals and resolutions and make them actually actionable in a real digestible way for you as a home care owner. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate this conversation. And I look forward to the next conversation that we are going to have that is going to take you right where you're at today and get you to where you want to be. Keep a lookout for the next episode of ActionCAST.